Shona. Are you nodding? Shona. Shona. Are you nodding? Shona. You nodded? Yeah?
Yeah, well, initially when Shona was a baby, she was, she was normal, meeting all the things, went to all of our 6 and 8 weeks checks, and there was never anybody telling me that there was a problem with her. So then when, of course, she started to, around about 11 months or whatever, she wasn't walking, she wasn't pulling herself up, she wasn't crawling, and she was falling over to the side, losing her balance quite often. So we had to then go through, why is this happening? Does she have an ear infection? Is there something that's causing her to lose her balance? And of course, there wasn't. As we met the paediatricians and the different doctors that we spoke to, we suddenly realised that obviously there was something wrong, and that was the first time I'd ever heard Rett syndrome.
I had heard of Rett syndrome because my mother had worked in a nursery for children with additional needs, but I was devastated when I found out that Shona had Rett syndrome.
I mean, obviously I worked with children at that time, and I knew a lot of disorders, and obviously there's ones that are quite prominent and they're quite more in the public knowledge that people know about, but Rett syndrome was not anything I'd heard of before. And all that anybody said to me was, oh, it's kind of like Parkinson's, it's kind of like multiple sclerosis, it's kind of like, but it seemed to be, but what actually is it? Rett syndrome is a neurological disorder, so children are born with it. It's very rare, 1 in 10,000 girls, but it doesn't come forward until, sometimes up until the age of 4 years old, it can actually come out. So they're born normally, they move forward normally, and then at some point we stop hitting milestones, and this is the damage that's being caused to them by the syndrome. As unbelievable as it could be, the doctors didn't, the people that I was speaking to, although they were saying, oh, it could be Rett syndrome and we could test for Rett syndrome, they didn't really know what it was either. It was very much, oh yeah, it's a bit like this and a bit like that. So there wasn't knowledge there. I didn't really know what it was. I kind of went into it quite blindly at first, and I had to use the internet and glean as much knowledge as I can, but most of my knowledge from Rett syndrome came from watching Shona every day and learning and hitting the things the problems that we had, meeting them head on and sorting them out as we went along. So obviously now I have a lot more information there, and I understand a lot about Rett syndrome, but at the time there wasn't a lot of knowledge there at all.
The difficulties with looking after someone with a neurological disorder is that they're often quite locked in, and yet by watching their sort of non-verbal communication that they do understand what you're saying, and they do want to be a part of what you're doing, and you've really always got to include them, always try and make sure you give them a really fulfilling life, and don't talk over them, keep their life interesting. The fact that they can't communicate verbally doesn't mean that you should just, you really have to strive to keep their mind active and they're interested in life, give them a meaningful life.
Yeah, I mean, 13 years ago, the depth of knowledge on Rett syndrome was really poor. We found out that Shona had Rett syndrome in a poor way. A letter through the door wasn't good. it was hard to read that your child would be disabled for life, be in a wheelchair and not what was going to lose. Because at that point she still had functions, and that she was going to lose everything. The knowledge that was there was bits of paper, basically with some bullet points telling you all the most horrible things that you could never imagine for your child, and even like an early death. It was said, they won't live that long. I think we've come to understand Rett syndrome so much more now, that we know, and there is much more hope. But at that time, 13 years ago, it was poor.
Because it had so many problems associated with it, and it just seemed like the worst neurological condition.
So the disorder is a spontaneous mutation that occurs in early development, so in fact very early on, probably in the sperm, and it's just a chance happening. You get mutations occur all the time in genes, and unfortunately if you have a loss of function mutation in this gene MECP2, this results in Rett syndrome.
Back in 1960s, a physician called Andreas Rett characterized a specific symptom in a group of female, and he thought at this time it's because of hypertonia. And in 1980s, another scientist, physician, discovered actually that this symptom is a unique disorder, and because this was reported before, he gave it the name of Andreas Rett, who discovered it for the first time. And the condition became a unique neurodevelopmental disorder by itself called Rett syndrome. The causative gene was discovered in 1999, discovered that mutation of MECP2 linked gene is actually the reason for development of classical Rett syndrome.
So typically you can get symptoms of sort of like, really poor mobility. Maybe there's sort of repetitive movements like stereotypical hand movements. Quite often there's sort of epilepsy as well, so there's like a seizure related element to this syndrome as well. And because the gene that causes Rett syndrome is a sort of global gene, that has a knock-on effect that sort of affects the whole body in a certain way. So there's movement, but there's also cognitive functions as well. So really the child's brain doesn't develop as you hope it would, so they don't acquire speech, and they aren't able to sort of function at the same level as other kids of like sort of 2-3 years old, and that's when it becomes really noticeable to the family.
There's so many different things that can be involved. Scoliosis of the spine, where the spine constricts so that the children get actually stuck in a position. The spine sort of fuses into an S shape. So
she's had quite bad epilepsy. She's had lost weight to the point where she was looking so awful, and we've been through it all. It has been a journey, but every time Shona has a condition, every time there's a problem comes up, we just try to think practically, and we try to think, right, what can we do? And this is helpful, the fact that I'm a nurse. It's helpful that I have more resources at my fingertips. I've dealt with people with peg tubes, so when Shona was having problems taking her medication, and she was having seizures and she was starving, I said to Debi, before she gets any worse, we must get a peg tube. We must, because it's the only way we're going to be able to get medication. It's the only way we're going to be able to keep her nutritionally stable, and we must do that. And we did, and we went ahead probably before they would have come up with it themselves. So we pushed to get it, and we've never looked back. That has been a great thing. And then I was aware, because of my nursing, that people often ended up with their limbs being quite contracted. And I said to Debi, you know, because of her hypertonia and also her rigidity, that she could end up with problems like this, and we really need to make sure that we put something in place before that happens. Prevention is better than cure. So we pushed to get splints, and Shona wears splints, and she's always had splints in her feet and splints in her legs at night to keep her legs straight, and split braces for her hands.
It's quite a extensive thing, but initially the problem is the MECP2. There is a chromosome problem there, and that's what's causing it all to happen. Yeah.
Well, it's quite funny. When I started this project in 2008, there was very little choices about what virus you could use to deliver this one, and particularly in Rett it's quite challenging because you need to deliver MECP2 globally, and even in the brain you need to produce MECP2 back in all cells in the brain. And at this time there's no really a vector can achieve this. So I started in 2008 using the lentivirus, and I tried to put it in the brain of the mouse to see how it's gonna work, but actually it doesn't spread at all. But later on, 2 years after this, the era of adeno-associated virus, especially serotype 9, developed, and it gave us a hope that this one can be used for delivering MECP2 into Rett mice. So we shifted straight away at this point to AAV9, and we managed to publish the first proof of concept paper in 2013, showing that in Rett mice, if you give it MECP2 back through this way, you can have prolongation of survival, you can have amelioration of the Rett-like phenotype in mice.
Somebody once said it was like a fuse board with all the fuses, one's down. That one fuse causes all these technical problems, and yeah, so it's hard to actually know as well, because with Shona, that's a lot of the problems there that Shona's had, but with other children there can be multiple different problems as well. And because some children will walk and Shona doesn't. Shona can't walk and has never been able to walk and never crawled, but some children do. Some children can run, but it's very varied throughout different children.
Originally, when Shona was diagnosed, there was social media was quite sort of just starting up, and we hung on every word. There's in America the RSRT, Monica Kunrad, anything she had to say, anything she had her daughter Chelsea, anything that she sent, put on social media or emailed or anything, we hung in every word with great hope that something was going to happen, and things have since then, with reverse Rett, with social media, families coming together, it just fills you with hope. I feel now that we're advancing towards a cure, and we no longer kind of feel that we'll have Shona with Rett syndrome for the rest of our life. We now feel that just try and keep Shona as good as we possibly can, and that the cure is coming. So it's just been great to have reverse Rett. I mean, they just have been filled me with and filled Debi with so much hope, and being actively involved in fundraising has helped too, because you feel like you're really doing something really positive. So it's just so much better than it was. I mean, it was at first was despair, but now great hope.
My name's Rachel Stevenson. I'm co-founder and executive director of Reverse Rett. I was inspired to start Reverse Rett by my daughter Amber. She was about 14 years old at the time. She'd always been quite well for someone with Rett syndrome, but she'd started to lose her mobility, and I was desperate to find something that could help her. I looked at the research looked very promising, but it just wasn't happening fast enough, and that's why we set up Reverse Rett, to have an impact on the research and ultimately bring about treatment as quickly as possible.
Well, we're only a small team, so there's 4 or 5 of us doing the job of, many more people. So it's quite intense. We often take work home with us and we never switch off. And we do things that people probably don't realise, like we've got a clinical trial taking place at the moment, and we're in charge of recruiting the patients for the trial, and also all the travel arrangements and hotels and everything else that needs to be done to make sure that the burden is taken away from the family.
People don't really know about Rett syndrome because not only are the girls silent in this situation, the families are so overwhelmed with all of the care that goes into looking after somebody with Rett syndrome and the relentless onslaught of symptoms of the condition that people, I guess, over time haven't had the time or energy to be able to work on things like awareness. But also, I think there was a time where the prognosis for Rett syndrome was much more poor, so people spent the time looking after their children and giving them the best life they could, knowing that they would probably die at quite a young age. And I think that's changing now. There's more management of the condition, and so people are living longer and life isn't as difficult as it was, and so people now have the time and space to be able to talk about Rett. I think the other difficulty about Rett syndrome getting out there in the media is it's a difficult disease to pin down. It's a multi-system disorder that affects lots of different things, and when you start listing all of the symptoms of Rett syndrome, people either get lost, overwhelmed, or they go into this is so bad, I don't really want to hear any more blocking. So it's trying to identify Rett and help people empathize with it, but also something about the disease that they can hold on to and take away, instead of it just being this disease that affects girls and, you can have tummy problems, you can't speak, you can't walk, you can't use your hands, you can have orthopedic problems. It's tying all those together and making it meaningful.
I think the problem is there's a lot of rare diseases and there's a lot of great causes out there, and most people have got their own cause or their own because they've been touched by something, whatever it may be. I think that's the problem. Most of our fundraisers come from one family. They're not just general members of the public. They've been touched by someone's story. So we've just got to keep on banging away and hope that people take notice.
There's lots of equipment that we need on a daily basis, and that's become even more so now that she's grown in height and she's grown in weight. I used to find it easier to move her around, but of course now she's a scoliosis of her spine. I was saying earlier on that the spine's quite twisted, so lifting her from underneath her arms isn't really an option for her. It's sore and she winces in pain with it. So we have a hoist installed. We use our wheelchair every day. We also have a three-wheeler which we use as well, because the wheelchairs, it's okay if you're going to walk down the street, but it's very hard to go off any kind of ground with that. Initially when she was a baby, she could be lifted into the bath. Of course, now that's just not an option. So we have a shower chair. It's not the most comfortable, and I think she would love to have a bath, to be honest, but it's all I can do to get her washed, and so I just have to go with it. We have a standing frame. We've used a standing frame from when she was possibly a year old. They've changed and got bigger and bigger and bigger, so they're taking over my house. But yeah, she lies into that. We strap her all in with her feet, and and her waist and her chest, and we strap her in, and then we bring her upright to put weight down through her body, just to give her the, if she's standing up and she's putting weight down through her body, then she's going to be building up some sort of muscle, even if it's not very much, but it'll help, and also helps with digestion. And we hope that having persevered and doing that we have given some prevention to the scoliosis, and that it's not as bad as it would be if we hadn't used that equipment. That's all daily equipment, and it takes over a lot of your house. So yeah, there's a lot, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more if they come.
Oh, we've had our moments with Shona. It's been very difficult to keep hopeful at times, but I think I'm quite an optimistic person. I think the people in Reverse Rett are very optimistic. They always are talking about a cure, so I feel that we just have to brush ourselves down, and I try and support Debi, and together we do it because we're doing it for Shona. So I think it's been helpful having nursing experience, and then when the challenges come, then I know how to, I can think. It's a nurse's way of thinking. Right, this is a problem. This could be a potential problem, but we need to sort this problem out. I think and I hope that we've kept Shona in a healthier place because of my knowledge, which has been great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I started out where I was young, and Shona was young and easier in a way to handle. And so I decided I need to get involved in this, and I'll get involved in charities. I set up my own charity because I wanted to do something. I wanted to help. So I set up Help Me Communicate, which I've now closed. And purely because things have got so much harder, Shona's got so much harder work. The epilepsy took over a lot, and I just couldn't do what I was doing before. You had to run all your own accounts, and I was up and down seeing accountants, and I couldn't do it any longer. But I'm glad that I did do it. And with Reverse Rett, which is a charity that's quite close to our hearts, and they're moving towards a cure. We want a cure. They'll do, I think, above and beyond anything to get there, and I support them very strongly. There is some other charities out there that are to do with Rett syndrome, and of course we do give money, we do attend events, but I think Reverse Rett is the key in solving this whole thing, and maybe bringing our children back. Yeah.
At Reverse Rett, we host lots of different kinds of events to raise money for Rett syndrome research.
We have a run in North Berwick, which we've done for the last 4 years in Scotland. That's been really well attended. The whole community gets behind it. We have a virtual run in October, which is Rett Syndrome Awareness Month, where people all over the world can enter.
We have bigger events such as our London Gala, which is every November.
On top of that, there's a couple of campaigns like the Big Give, where people can double their donation, which we've been a part of for the last 9 years. That's usually in early December.
For Reverse Rett, it really is people doing small things that all adds up that generates the income for the charity. There's no kind of magic wand every year where we raise X amount of money from a very big kind donor or a super great event. The London Gala is good, it has potential to do more, but really most of our money is coming from the families who are closely affected by Rett syndrome, who are working hard to generate interest in their communities and beyond.
We've just held our first Discovery Day, which is, it's more about giving people information, but it's something that we hope to do more of in the future.
The funds that we raise at Reverse Rett since the referendum have exclusively gone to University of Edinburgh projects, and this is because we fund laboratory research through the Rett Syndrome Research Trust, which is our partner organisation in the States. Since the Reverse Rett was launched, we used to send quarterly funds to RSRT in the States and then split it between the projects we're interested in. Some of them were in the UK. Now it makes more sense economically to send the money to the University of Edinburgh. So we're funding the labs of Professor Adrian Bird and Stuart Cobb.
So we were interested initially in how the brain works and how it's wired, and it became apparent that this gene MECP2 that underlies Rett syndrome seems to have an important function, and we were really studying that, and then we got into studying the mechanisms of the disease, how MECP2 is actually causing the disease, and through that we then looked at the reversibility or the inherent treatability of the disorder. When we found positive data there, we then moved forward in terms of developing therapies for Rett syndrome, and we're focused on gene therapies targeting the root cause of the disorder, which is the MECP2 gene.
Back in 2013, we published the first one, and now it's 30 years, and we try to optimize the expression cassette, because the problem with MECP2 is the very narrow therapeutic window. It's not just like giving MECP2 back to a patient or to mice and this will solve the condition. The level of expression need to be very tightly controlled. Overexpression of MECP2 will produce toxicity. Low expression of MECP2 will produce Rett syndrome. So you need to keep the level of MECP2 in a very narrow safety margin, and actually this is the real challenge for us now. So most of our effort at the moment devoted to generate a new expression cassette that either express low level of MECP2 and this can be built up with time, or we can regulate it from outside by giving the drug or any substance to tune down the level of MECP2 expression in the brain. So this is really the area of our focus at the moment. We are not concerned about efficacy because we showed the proof of concept before, but our concern mainly now is about toxicity and how we can avoid it.
So because Rett syndrome is caused by problems in one gene, MECP2, we're basically looking at ways to sort of deliver this gene back into the system, or back into the child, basically to try and reactivate this gene working and to get everything working again. It's a sort of fundamental type of treatment. There are so many symptoms associated with Rett syndrome, and each drug that's given to the kid is sort of designed to sort of treat one individual symptom. So for example, one drug for breathing, one drug to try and control epilepsy. So with our gene therapy, what we're really hoping is that it's a fundamental treatment that will sort of help all the symptoms.
So gene therapy as a field has really moved on massively in the last decade, and just last week there was a big new gene therapy drug launched on the market for another severe neurological disorder. In terms of Rett syndrome, we've been working on a gene therapy for a number of years now, and we showed the first proof of concept that gene therapy may work in models of Rett syndrome a number of years ago. And what we've been doing in recent years is, as part of an international gene therapy consortium, is try to develop better gene therapies that are more effective and safer, so that these can be ultimately tested in individuals with Rett syndrome.
So there's a gene therapy clinical trial happening for Rett syndrome within the next couple of years, and they have a sort of drug, they have a molecule that they're going to use in this clinical trial. And our role at Edinburgh is to basically develop the next sort of the next version of this drug. So basically, whatever happens with this clinical trial, hopefully our work will be developing an even better version that we can then use in a sort of longer sort of follow-up study.
We're using the mice to test our gene therapy expression cassette, which is fine, but the problem we got with mice as well as is different from species. So the virus is not working the same in different species. We got another higher model like rat, for example, but again, when you translate this from mice to rat to higher human primates, sometimes the efficacy is not the same. So this is the real challenge now, to get some therapeutic molecule or gene therapy cassette which can work through species, and once you confirm safety and efficacy of this, you can take it straight away to a human translation and you start your clinical application.
In terms of Rett syndrome research, there's a lot of collaboration. It's very collaborative. So, you know, we collaborate with colleagues here in the UK. We collaborate with colleagues in Italy and the United States, and we have a formal gene therapy consortium which links together multiple labs so that we're sort of pulling together to try and advance things as quickly as we can.
So this is the room that was made for Shona, the wet room. The council fitted it all, which was fantastic. We did have a little bit of wait, but we got it. And this chair here, I have to take this through into the bedroom and put it in. Now, it's all has bits and bobs to keep her steady and strap her in. She's got a wee vest thing that goes over as well, so it holds her all in there. Then I bring her back through here, and then we just shower her. It's not, sometimes I don't think it's what she would want. I think she'd rather have a bath. She enjoyed being in the bath, but you know, there's not a lot that we can do. We have to just go with what we have, and this is it for at the moment. And it's great because the floor, it does have a slight wee tilt there, and the water has a pump, so it pumps the water out, so it's fairly easy to use and keep and everything. And yeah, so it's a great wee room, and obviously again the amount of money that it would have cost to fit it privately, it is amazing that, you know, the occupational therapist just came in and realised what we need and helped us with that, so we're really lucky. So this hoist here was fitted not so long ago, only like a week ago we've had it, so I'm still practising. But it's fantastic because actually what was happening was I was struggling to lift her. I've always been able to lift her, and I think that was quite hard not to be able to just be able to lift her and move her around anymore. And Mum had said you really need to get a hoist, and I kept not putting it off but feeling like as if no, I'll manage, but and then of course we got the hoist, and it is actually such a fantastic bit of equipment. So I would do all her moving and handling in here. I would use the hoist to move her from her bed into the chair, would move her into her wheelchair, into the shower chair, into anything. Is all I have really is this from here to here where this runs. That's is where the moving and handling is. Alright. Say hello. So that she has to wear this underneath her all the time. This is a sling, and she'll actually come home from school. She goes to school, she'll come home with that sling underneath her, and it's very, very simple as putting the bits together. I think the first time that I did this last week, she was looking at me like, oh no Mum, I don't know if I trust you with this. I think she thought she might end up on the floor, but yeah, so you just strap you out like a Christmas turkey, don't we? And then have to move her in line with the hoist beam and attach her on. It's quite simple. Sure, we'll get faster at it as time goes on, won't we? Okay, and once she's secure, and then you can just move her along. Okay, think checks this is fine, don't you? And then you can go back down like that. So that's how like I should be like doing all the transfers and things for her. But yeah, so that's she, isn't it? That's what we do. Again, this bed as well, and it's a profiling bed. So it's got sides on it, and the ability to manoeuvre like a hospital bed. So that if we're having any problems, we can sit her up and give her more tilt and things as well. So, hey, you're right. If you take that off your head, hey, take that, we'll put it on your lama. Right. So yeah, so that's the hoist and the equipment.
To watch your daughter, your only daughter, your only granddaughter suffering from a condition, and you just can't, you're trying your best to get it, to make it a thing of the past for both of them, but you just can't take that time out from being sort of sorry for yourself. You just really got to turn that around and say, look, we're going to fight for you, Shona. We're going to give you a good life. We're going to get you better. And before you get better, we're going to take you on good holidays. We're going to give you a good, meaningful life. We're going to make sure that you do everything, maybe not in the way that other children get to do things, but you will go to the beach and you will play in the garden, you will have a swing, you will get to go to parties and go to cinema, and you'll do a lot, maybe not just the way that other people will do it, but you will have a taste of it, so that when I look back with Shona at her childhood memories, I can say, you had a bike. The fact that we had to strap her into it with leg splints and all sorts of things, and she maybe only was on it like for 10 minutes max before she had sort of a seizure activity and had to be rescued from it, but she still was in it. And she's been on the beach. I've even pulled her along a beach in a sledge so that she could have the water over the top of her, and things like that. I mean, I've tried my best, and Debi does. She's remarkable. She's very, she's great. I mean, I think Debi's, the best thing Shona's got is Debi. Yeah, definitely.
One of the most strenuous things with Rett syndrome is what you've lost, and what you'll never do. So you, there's lots of, when you have children, you have dreams of things that you'll do, and you can't do them anymore, so that's hard. Yeah, that's really hard. And I think that if you look at all of the things in life that you wanted for your children, and then silly things like I've got a horse, and I would have always thought that when I've had a little girl, when she's a baby, that we'd be able to go riding together, we'd be able to go climb mountains and go do things, and you can't do these things anymore. They're gone. But hopefully, with hope, maybe we'll get something back. I don't think she'll ever be climbing mountains, to be fair, but you never know. So there's a lot of things that are taken away from you, and taken away from your family as well, because I was working and I had a career before I had Shona. I was building it. I was wanting to open my own nursery and do things like that, and having a child with special needs takes over your life. You have to put pretty much everything out the window for that child. So that's kind of hard, and that takes its toll on your family as well, because my mum's one of the only people that helps me with Shona, purely because we need all the equipment. So, that's quite hard, because as we said before, the equipment's really expensive. The council provide one piece of equipment, so mum's went out of her way to buy things from her own money, to have things in her house so that Shona can visit her house and be in her house. But there's not a lot of people there to help, so you're impacting on your family to help you, which is kind of hard, because you feel like you're taking things away from them as well. So it's a bit of a hard going life at times, you know, you just have to be positive, you have to be strong, and learn about every single weird and wonderful thing that Rett syndrome throws at you. I'm glad that it's came in small parts and sections and not all at the one time, because initially the first problems that we had were just, she can't walk, you know, oh, I have to carry her here and carry her there, and she's in a buggy, and you know, this moved forward to having like 20 seizures in a day and having to learn how to administer drugs to knock her out, and jumping in and out of ambulances and spending time in hospital, which is never that easy, and learn. And then with she started that she couldn't swallow anymore, so she was starving and she was literally emaciated, like she looked like so thin, and that was terrifying, you know, looking at her, and how do we get her to eat? She can't swallow properly, and so she had her peg tube fitted, which has saved her life. But then learning about how to use the tubes in her stomach, how to administer the medications, how to feed her through a feeding set, things that you have to get used to. Again, slowly but surely we move through all these things, and then it becomes the norm, you know, it's fine, and you get on with it and you do it. But there's so many hurdles that you come across, and I'm sure there'll be more, like, but you just have to just keep your chin up and get on with it. But yeah, I'd say the hardest part is just not having the child that you thought you would have, and then feeling guilty because you don't have, like, because you feel like you shouldn't think like that. It's not easy.
I think the bond with Debi has probably, yes, strengthened. I'm aware that Debi needs my assistance. I try my best to help Debi as much as I can, but I'm also aware of that she needs to be an independent woman too, so try not to interfere too much, although that is quite difficult. I've sometimes got my hand on the phone, ready to phone Debi, and I think, no, just leave it, you know, because I feel I need to give her a bit of space, you know. In saying that, if Debi phones me, I'll drop everything and run to help her. And that's why we need to be near each other, so that I can give her that kind of assistance. And well, Peter, I mean, he's great. I mean, Debi's dad, I mean, he helps so much. Drives Shona around all over the place in our car, picks her up from school in emergencies when she's sick, and recently had her hematemesis. It was Peter sort of rushed to her rescue, and I think we're kind of a team. I think we work in the best interests of Shona and Debi to try and make their life, you know, as happy and smooth running as possible. But yes, we're a close work team, yes.
So what helps you remain hopeful in, say, these really sort of strenuous times that you might have?
I'm always hopeful. I couldn't get out of bed in the morning if I didn't have hope that things could improve for my daughter. The thing that keeps me motivated when I'm having a really bad day is thinking about people who have children who are younger than Amber, and thinking about everything that those children have or had ahead of them, the lives they could be living, and the parts of their childhood that they could be enjoying that they're missing out on, but for the lack of this protein. And so if there's any way, even if we can't make that difference for our children with Rett syndrome who are older, that in 5 or 10 years these younger children who are, there's some who are just really suffering so much with different parts of the condition. If they could just have a better life or an improved life, that's why I can't not carry on doing this work, because they deserve so much better, and so do so many of these families who'll just do anything for love of these girls.
One can edit genes in cells, and this has moved into clinical trials for certain genetic diseases. It's easier for certain diseases than others, and brain diseases are a particular challenge. And the challenge there is actually delivering the gene editing medicine effectively to the nervous system. That's really quite challenging. But I think in the future, this is the way the technology is going, and one can envisage, several years down the line that it will be relatively common to be able to, engineer to correct the underlying causes of many genetic diseases.
Well, there is some publication about the ability to edit a mutation in the DNA itself, or to edit this mutation at the level of the mRNA, which is a product of your DNA. This is some encouraging news about this, but I think the problem now is how efficacious is your editing and how specific it is. So the technique used normally is to cut and replace, and this needs to be done specifically in the mutation site. I don't think at the moment we reach the stage of absolute specificity, which means you only work in the gene of interest, which is MECP2. But the work done so far at the level of mRNA is quite encouraging, and I hope in the future, together with the development in the virus technology production, this will produce repair with high efficacy enough to reverse symptom in Rett syndrome.
So that's what gives me hope. That's what it keeps me going. It's just that we're living in this world of technology and science, and every day's and gene therapy. That's just going to be amazing. Yeah.
So there's lots of things that are definitely positives that are going to help us as we carry on through all this amazing technology that's coming. And I would really honestly, in 10 years, think there'll be something. I don't know what, but I believe that there will be something out there that will help her have a better life, a more fulfilled life. Yeah, I hope so. So you got hope in it.
Well, with clinical trials starting this year for a cure, with gene therapy trials, 5 years, we could be right on the cusp. I know these things take time with the red tape of getting things passed, and if they are successful. But in 10 years, I'd hope to be redundant and there'd be no need for reverse Rett, hopefully.